In 1847, a man named Ellis Bell released a novel that would invent an entire genre of literature, spawn over 100 years of movie adaptations, and a song by Kate Bush. Kind of remarkable when you consider that the author wasn't really named Ellis Bell, wasn't a man, and chose a title for her book that almost nobody would understand. The novel is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. It's back in the news because there's yet another controversial Hollywood remake, this time starring Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi. So, what is this book about? What does the title mean? Why did Emily Bronte put someone else's name on it? Why is every movie about it so controversial? And lastly, are we really going to answer all that in 5 minutes? No, but we'll do our best.
We choose to go to the moon.
The rum-tum-tugger is a curious cat.
100 billion other galaxies.
Right now, you like me.
Welcome to 5 Minute Trivia, where we're making the world smarter 5 minutes at a time. I'm your host, R.M. Zuberi. This week's episode is our monthly 5-minute lit feature, where we cover a work of literature in all the extensive detail 5 minutes will allow. Wuthering Heights was published in 1847 under the pen name Ellis Bell, who was actually Emily Bronte. She was one of an extremely literary trio of sisters who pretended they were brothers when they released a book of poetry together. Now, we've already covered their story in our episode on pen names, but briefly, one sister was Charlotte Bronte and the other was Anne Bronte. They're famous as writers in their own right, and someday on some future episode, we'll talk about them too. So, now that we've got the name of the author out of the way, what's with the name of the book? Like, what is a Wuthering Height? Well, Emily Bronte was from Yorkshire, England. Wuthering is an old local term that, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, means a wind that is blowing very strongly, or a place where the wind blows very strongly. So why not just call it Windy Heights or Blustering Heights? Well, Wuthering is more violent, more foreboding, more chilling. And that is the theme of this book. Wuthering Heights takes place in a desolate farmhouse in the moors of Yorkshire. Moors are areas of rolling land covered with bogs and marshes, and this hostile, forbidding terrain is where a clueless bumbler named Lockwood has decided to rent a house. After settling in, he goes to visit his landlord, Mr. Heathcliff, because he thinks they'll get along really well. We don't really know why he thinks this, but we did say he was clueless. Through a series of unfortunate events involving dogs and a snowstorm, Lockwood ends up staying at Mr. Heathcliff's estate, which is called, Wuthering Heights. The story of Wuthering Heights is told to Lockwood by a loyal housemaid named Nellie through a series of flashbacks after Lockwood spends the night and is awakened by an ice-cold hand knocking at the window and a voice moaning.
Let me in.
The voice identifies itself as a ghost. But not just any ghost, the ghost of Catherine Linton. Her presence makes Heathcliff upset, and a little happy that she's still there to torment him. As it turns out, Heathcliff and Catherine have some history. You see, Catherine and her brother Hindley were raised at Wuthering Heights by their single dad, until their dad brought home another kid. In the book, he's described variously as dark-skinned, a gypsy, and a lascar, which is an outdated term for a poor sailor from India. In the movies, he's been played by Laurence Olivier, Timothy Dalton, and now Jacob Elordi. The darkest thing about any of them is Timothy Dalton's hair. That kid is Heathcliff. He grows up at Wuthering Heights with Catherine and Hindley. Hindley hates him, but he eventually goes off to college, leaving Catherine and Heathcliff behind. Catherine loves Heathcliff as a brother. Heathcliff loves Catherine as, well, not a sister. When Catherine and Hindley's dad dies, Hindley returns as master of Wuthering Heights. Now remember, he hates Heathcliff and reduces him to a servant. Catherine still spends a lot of time with him until another series of unfortunate events involving dogs leaves Catherine at the estate next door. That place is owned by a family called the Lintons, and they transform Catherine from a wild tomboy into a polished young lady. We also meet the boy next door, a polished young man named Edgar Linton. He is nothing like that wild, unkempt, dark-skinned servant Catherine has been hanging out with. You might say Catherine now has more in common with Edgar than she does with Heathcliff. Hey, someone cue the foreshadowing music. Thank you. So, Hindley gets married and they have a baby, but the wife dies in childbirth, leaving Hindley an angry, raving mess of a man who's even harsher to Heathcliff than he was before. With all that chaos going on, Catherine falls in love with Edgar. She does love Heathcliff, but not like that. He's more myself than I am, she says. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. They're just too similar for her own good. Heathcliff overhears her say that and vanishes, seemingly for good. Catherine initially goes nuts when he leaves, but eventually settles down and marries Edgar. 3 years later, Heathcliff returns. He's wealthy, though the book never explains where he got his money. He's also hell-bent on revenge. He's going to humiliate everyone who ever wronged him, which is everyone. Hindley, Catherine, Edgar, even the dogs. Heathcliff kicks things off by marrying Edgar's sister, Isabella. He moves her into Wuthering Heights with Hindley and Hindley's son, who's basically a mini Hindley. That dysfunctional mess makes Isabella miserable. Meanwhile, Catherine gives birth to a little girl, also named Catherine, and then dies in childbirth. This is usually where the movie adaptations end the story, with Catherine, his beloved, dying in Heathcliff's arms. But this is 5 Minute Lit, not 5 Minute Hollywood, so we are going to keep on going. Now, one of the confusing things about Wuthering Heights is that there are a lot of similar sounding names. So just to recap, Catherine Earnshaw marries Edgar Linton and becomes Catherine Linton, then has a baby girl who's also named Catherine Linton. But we're going to be like her dad and just call the baby Kathy. All good? Great. Now, Catherine Linton, the mother, is dead. When she's laid to rest, Heathcliff begs her corpse to torment him for the rest of his life, and even replaces a strand of Edgar's hair in her locket with his own. Yeah, we're gonna need that foreshadowing music again. Isabella eventually has enough of Heathcliff and leaves him for good. She also has a son named Linton, as in her former last name. The baby's last name? Heathcliff. Linton Heathcliff. So Isabella Linton married Heathcliff and had a baby named Linton Heathcliff. Next, Hindley dies. Hindley's son Hareton is left alone with his crazy, mean Uncle Heathcliff, and Heathcliff is now the master of Wuthering Heights. Isabella also dies. So, quite a body count here, so let's just run that down. So, deaths so far: Isabella Linton and the entire Earnshaw family of Mr. Earnshaw, Catherine, and Hindley. Still alive: Heathcliff, Edgar Linton, Heathcliff's son Linton, Hindley's son Hareton, and Catherine's daughter, Kathy. Heathcliff already has Wuthering Heights, and Hindley is dead, so you think that he's done with his revenge, right? Remember, Edgar crossed Heathcliff by marrying Catherine, so now Heathcliff is going to take Edgar's property. But how will Heathcliff get something that doesn't belong to him? Well, by having his son Linton marry Edgar's daughter, Kathy. Now, they are cousins, what with Linton's mother and Kathy's father being sister and brother, but if kings and queens can do it, why can't they? And then Edgar dies. Heathcliff has gotten Wuthering Heights, the property next door, revenge on everyone. He gets everything, except his true love, Catherine. In the end, that's what gets him. He obsesses over her, spends his time in her old room, stops eating, and eventually dies. He's buried next to Catherine and Edgar, but locals report that they've seen the ghosts of Catherine and Heathcliff together at last on the moors. In death, Heathcliff got what he never found in life, and it was the only thing he ever wanted. That's this week's somewhat overtime episode of 5 Minute Trivia. We'll see you next time, and thanks for listening.